everyone, it's Cassie here. Welcome back for another video here on my YouTube channel. Today we are participating in the Trinity Stamps May new release hop. I do want to show you what we're making today because this is a little bit longer video. I know for a hop you usually don't want long videos, but once you see what we're making here, I think you're going to want to stick around. So we are going to be using this stamp set. This is brand new. It's called Please Stand By. It goes so well with the previously released Stay Tuned die set. This is also new. This is called Local Programming. I love it. And then this is that Stay Tuned die that was released just last release. And it's that retro television, and all these things go so well together. And I'm going to show you. Here are a couple of stamps if you don't want to use those tiny dies, which can be a little intricate. That stamp works perfectly so that you don't have to use those tiny dies. We're also going to bring in this Slimline twist and slide die set. We're not making a Slimline, but because it is Slimline, you can cut it down for those that you need. We're going to be making a 5x7 card today. All right, so let's jump into that. To save a little bit of time, I had already stamped and colored out my images. This one is from that Local Programming. It's so cute. So I stamped it onto some Express It cardstock using Jet Black by Blackout ink by Ink on 3, and then I used my Olo markers to color it up. Super simple coloring. Same thing with this one. That one came from that Please Stand By. Super simple coloring, no shadowing with that one at all. And then, yeah, so I went ahead and did that just to save a little time because this is a longer video. Here are all the pieces for the television. We're going to kind of put that together, but I do need this television to be see-through. It needs to go all the way through. So I do need to bring in this die, and we're going to cut this out of that black piece. That was that base piece that you see inside the Stay Tuned die set. I'm going to use that border. I just wanted this all to be cohesive, but I do need it to be see-through. So we'll save those extra pieces. As you can see, I have a bunch going. I've used this die set quite a few times. I don't know what it is about the retro TV. I guess it just makes me feel it's nostalgic. So yeah, and so we'll go ahead and get started on assembling this. As I mentioned earlier, that Please Stand By stamp set does have a couple of stamps in there to make it a little bit simpler if you didn't want to use the tiny dies. I do have them die cut out, as you can see in that upper right hand corner, but we're going to go ahead and stamp this out just to show you how it looks just as good. Pardon my head. We're going to stamp down the little buttons. See, that looks pretty good. And we're also going to stamp out the dial that goes on top. And again, pardon my head. And we're using some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. I wanted that to be nice and crisp and black. I do bring in an alcohol marker just to kind of add a little shadowing to that in a second here. And I need to be careful not to go over those lines because that is not alcohol marker friendly. We'll use a little bit of liquid glue to adhere that down to the shadow piece. And I'm using liquid glue this whole time. I love liquid glue simply because it gives me a little bit of wiggle room, and you'll see later on I need that wiggle room. I do a little bit of mess up, but that's also because I am flying by the seat of my pants on this. I just had this idea that I wanted it to be see-through, and I needed a pull tab, and so I had no preconceived how to do it. I just had to kind of go with it. So we'll attach that down, and then we're going to grab in the extra pieces. So I've got some patterned paper that comes from the My Mind's Eye Wild Asparagus. I cut that down to be 4 3/4 by 6 3/4, so it'll be a little bit smaller than the front of an A7 card. And then I brought in some rust colored cardstock to make it very nostalgic, like some rust colored carpet. I'm bringing in that piece from the Stay Tuned die, and I'm just going to use a pencil to lightly mark the inside of where that the television part of the console TV is. I'm going to use some scissors and I'm going to cut that out. Now, again, flying by the seat of my pants, I'm going to go just slightly outside of that line that I have drawn because I wasn't sure how big I needed it to be. Spoiler alert, I need it to be a little bit bigger. I always suggest cut a little because you can always come back in and cut more. You can't put it back in there. So I cut it out, and I should have tested it, but I did not. We're bringing in some transparency film. It's basically the same as acetate, just a lot cheaper. You can't, heat emboss on this, but that's okay. I rarely heat emboss on my acetate anyway. So I'm going to cut this out so that it can be the front of that TV, and I can have that look like an actual television. And so here's where I should have tested, but I didn't. So I'm using some liquid glue around the outside of that opening. We'll stick down our acetate or our transparency sheet to that. And then I let that sit for even a few seconds, and I think I'm going to start doing some assembly. So playing around with that, trying to figure out exactly how that goes, but I need to work backwards. So I'm going to bring in this gray piece, and that's when I realize, ooh, some of that wall is still going to show through. So I need to trim off a little bit more. Yes, there is some glue on that transparency sheet, and I could trim out more if I needed, but it ends up working out just fine that that glue won't show through once I attach it back down. So again, trimming off a little bit more. Now we'll test. That works fine. You don't see the wall through it, and that's what we want. So now I'm going to attach this down to the front. If you did end up cutting too much, you could always attach it down to the acetate once you put the acetate back on there, but I didn't do that. Now we'll go ahead and put our glue back on there, and we'll attach down our transparency sheet. And I was just making sure that none of that glue was showing through. And it wasn't, so we are all safe there. All right, so now I can assemble the rest of the front of the TV. Again, working backwards and using that liquid glue. And then we'll do the frame to the television. I suppose you could skip this part, but I really feel like it frames it up nicely. It does remind me of those console TVs from back in the day. And then I'll add the base for it, like the little feet for the television. And that's going to go right over that carpet. And once all that is assembled, then we can work on how this mechanism is actually going to work. This is one of those projects where I was thinking about it at 3 in the morning, you know, because I'm at that age where I wake up in the middle of the night for no reason. I am going to trim down this piece. Once again, that's from the Please Stand By stamp set. I don't need to make it perfectly around there. I'm just going to kind of trim that down. And then for this piece, I do need it to be a little bit smaller. So I'm using my pencil to just mark very lightly on those corners. I'll erase that later. And then I'm going to trim that out to be bigger because I want that to be slightly bigger than our actual television. Once again, it's always better to cut less because you can always cut more if you need to. You just can't put it back on there. And then I'm going to bring in these pieces, just a couple of pieces from that Slimline twist and slide, and I'm going to tack that down and run that through my die cutting machine. That's where our pull tab is going to be. And then I did cut out 3 of these actually. I wanted this to be a pretty sturdy piece, and this is going to be what our pull tab is. I think this is actually used for another part of that twist and slide, but it works perfectly for a pull tab. So I've put 3 pieces of that together. I'm going to mark it because I obviously don't need it to be that long. And then I'm going to use my guillotine trimmer. If you used several pieces of cardstock, you may not be able to use your guillotine trimmer. You might just have to use scissors, but you're not going to see the back of that anyway, so it doesn't need to be a completely straight line. I'm going to attach down my pull tab to the back of our piece that I've colored up, and then I'm just kind of marking where that's going to go. Well, I guess I'm not marking it. I'm going to use a little piece of mint tape to tack that down and then use my glue all around, just not making sure that I don't get any on that mint tape. That mint tape is just going to hold it in place where I need it, and then I can glue it down, and then I can pull away my front piece and then peel off that mint tape. So then that's perfectly in there where it needs to be. I'll go ahead and decorate the inside, or at least put this piece of cardstock or pattern paper on the inside. That one's just some leftover pattern paper, and then I will add a sentiment later on, but now we need to stamp out our sentiments. So I'm grabbing sentiments from not only the Please Stand By, but the local programming, and we're going to stamp that onto some black sentiment stock from Pearblossom Press, use an anti-static powder tool, ink that up with some clear embossing ink, and then we're going to cover that with some fine detail white embossing powder. And then we'll have to hit that with our heat tool, and then we'll just make sure all of that is smooth and melted. And once that is, then we can trim that down with our guillotine trimmer. I'm just going to do very basic rectangular cuts around that. So now we have to build up our actual mechanism. So I'm just sticking that down on top of the piece that it's going to cover. And I'm going to bring in the world's best foam tape. And I'm really glad that I did that. I'm glad I didn't use a different foam tape. The reason why is because using this world's best foam tape from Pearblossom Press, it is actually repositionable for about 30 minutes. After about 24 hours, it is completely permanent. If you try to pull it up, you will tear your paper. But I am notorious for messing up where I put my foam tape or how I put my paper down on top of my foam tape. But this stuff is fabulous because it is repositionable. You're going to see me reposition it a couple of times. I'm trying to make a channel. I want to make sure that I have plenty of room for our little local programming image to be able to move up and out of the way. But then I'm realizing as I put this down on top, I do need to move our foam tape a little bit out because otherwise it's going to be seen through and I will end up having my pull tab stick to it, and I don't want that. We definitely don't want that. I'll bring in this stamp set. This is called the Papercrafting Magic, and I'm just going to use the word pull. We'll stamp that onto this piece right here. I'm going to double that up eventually. But now everything seems to be good, so I'll peel off that release paper. Checking again one more time. I'll peel off that release paper on all those eventually after I attach down our pull tab. So I'm going to, like I said, double this up. And then I can put a little bit of glue on my mechanism there and I can attach down the pull. All right, so that should be good. Now we'll pull off all of our release paper and we can start sticking down the front panel. Definitely make sure that your piece is all put together, or you have your slide tab, your pull tab in there, then you attach it down and everything should be good to go. And even that, I struggled with putting that down. So thankfully this stuff is repositionable. I love it. All right, so then I can pull it up and down. Check it out. It looks so good. I love it. And then we'll put our sentiments on there. We interrupt this broadcast for a very important message. And then we'll put the happy birthday on the inside. I'm going to trim it down just a little bit. And I thought about putting some embellishments on the front, but this is probably going to be more of a masculine card, even though you could put embellishments on there. I was happy with the way it was looking. Other than this part, I didn't want it to make it look like the TV was just floating there, so I am using a Copic marker, and then I'm going to bring in a blender just to kind of blend that out a little bit so it looks like there's some shadowing underneath. And then I bring in the antenna pieces from the Stay Tuned die set, and we'll put that down on top using a little bit of liquid glue. But I gotta tell you, I love when you have a thought and it actually comes together. It doesn't always happen for me, but when things like this come together the way I'm thinking, I love it. So this is gonna finish off the card. And like I said, this is a part of a video hop, so head on down to my description box down below to get all the details and hop around and check out all of the new release from Trinity Stamps. You're going to be so impressed. Lots of cool things for this month. And yeah, I just love how this card turned out. If you like it, please hit that like button. Definitely consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And as always, I will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.